Hello. Today I will be bringing you a rather interesting new premium cruiser, the HMS Perth, the first Royal Australian Navy cruiser to be introduced to the game. Now, the ship is obviously Leander-class, and it's very much based on the Leander. But one of the things you'll notice straight off the bat is, of course, it has HE. And this is becoming a bit of a worrying trend to me that all these Royal Navy cruisers themselves all have purely AP, but then all these premiums like the Belfast and now the Perth are the ones that get access to HE. This is honestly a bit annoying to me. I mean, something many people have expressed great desire to have on the actual ships themselves, and VG keeps adding it to the premiums but not to the line itself. That does feel a bit like a slap in the face to, well, probably a lot of the Royal Navy cruiser players and a lot of the people who looked forward to the ship. And now the ship itself, while it's very much based on the Leander class, it does have one extremely unique thing going for it, and that is the smoke. Rather than make the usual smoke, well, the default smoke obviously that most ships have is like you pop it, it blooms for 20 seconds. Blooms means like the smoke puffs, the time the smoke puffs are rendered on your screen, so to say. That's the smoke blooms for about 20 seconds, and you can move around during that time, but then you have to stop, and once it's finished blooming, the smoke will stay in place for, like, depending on the type of smoke, it can stay from 1 minute to several minutes if you're got a USDD smoke, but the usual time is, let's say, 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, depending on what nationality you are. Now, the HMS Perth, however, has a bit of a unique one. Unlike the Royal Navy one, which blooms for about 7 seconds and then lasts like 100 seconds, this one only lasts 10 seconds, but it blooms for a full 90 seconds. So that means you have a 1.5 minute blooming smoke, which basically means that you are allowed to move inside your smoke, and as long as you stay within the boundaries and give it time to puff in between, you can theoretically maneuver quite a bit. Now, I say theoretically because in practice it doesn't really translate that well into the game. The biggest issue really is that the smoke bloom is set at the same default timer, like how many smoke puffs you get per 10 seconds is set as the default time as the normal smoke, and that translates to not really allowing much movement at all. In fact, I've noticed that if you go any faster than a quarter speed in your smoke, you are going to glide out of your own smoke and get detected. As you can see here, as soon as I speed up and I try to actually maneuver with the smoke active, I get spotted out of it. And even half speed seems to be just a bit too fast for this smoke blooming to handle. So while the idea of being able to maneuver a lot in the smoke, I love the idea, I love new mechanics, I love new concepts, and I think this one is a really cool one. I don't think it's realized that well because it doesn't really give you that much room to maneuver. It plays very similarly to your normal smoke, simply because you have so little room to maneuver that most of the time there's not really much point to it. I mean, you move around at a quarter speed, you can kind of creep into caps. That's pretty much what I've been using it for the most, creeping into capture points that I want to get, and sneaking in when people don't expect you and kind of catching people a bit off guard, but that really won't last long once people get used to this new mechanic. And one of the naturally biggest drawbacks is that it has the same cooldown as any other smoke. Well, one of my torps hits. These are unlike the Lander, which has 6 km torps. This one has 8 km torps. So they are slightly better, and I use them quite frequently, and I happen to get a random hit on the enemy DD there, I think. And now, one of the biggest issues, as I said, with the smoke is it has the same cooldown as the normal smoke. But because it's active for so long, it blooms for so long, you have a lot more downtime when you have no access to smoke at all, because it blooms for 90 seconds and then after that it goes on its 2 minute 30 second cooldown. Oh, I think 150 seconds. Yeah, I think it's 2 minutes 30 second cooldown. It goes on that cooldown after all that And the issue, of course, is that, well, since the smoke duration is only 10 seconds, once your smoke has run out, you have over 2 minutes where you have no access to smoke at all. And that becomes a huge issue because this ship isn't really tanky enough to be able to deal with playing outside of smokes. And this ship doesn't really have the range to be able to deal with tanking or like surviving outside the smokes either. The Leander has 13.2 km range. This one has only 12.8. And considering the concealment, if you don't have the 15-point captain, considering you have to level a completely new captain, as UK or Royal Navy captains do not work on it, it means that well, 9.8 concealment and 12.8 range, that's not really a much room to work with. And opening fire on any battleship without your smoke available at 12.8 kilometers in a squishy, basically Leander, is literally asking to be deleted. I'm wondering why my entire team is pushing through the A cap into the enemy base when we need to cap B and C, because that's where the enemy is. But those are questions for random battles that not many people can answer. So ultimately, I love the concept, but the ship doesn't really work that well. I mean, I've had some success with it, but it's not anything that I couldn't do better in other T6 cruisers. I mean, 12.8 km range. Now, it does have access to HE, but it does have the same reload as the Lander at 7.5 seconds. And the HE only really has a 9% chance of fire. So, I mean, flags buff it up at 10, and then with Demolition Expert you can get it to 13, which is a decent chance of fire, but it's not going to be as high chance of fire as any other cruiser. So, the only real mechanic, or in this case, honestly, it feels like gimmick it has, is that smoke that allows you to move ever so slightly in it. And that just doesn't really feel enough. Especially since right now I have an extremely hard, I've said it before and I will still say it, I have an extremely hard time recommending any T5 and any T6 premiums in the current meta, because T5 and T6s tend to get shafted pretty hard by matchmaking these days. You are more in T6s, you're more than likely to end up against T8s, and in T5s you're more than likely to end up against T7s, and there are not many ships that can actually handle it well. Honestly, it's mostly premium DDs that don't really care too much about tiers. These do the best upscaled. Battleships, depending on the type, can do okay, but they will never really be that specifically good. But a cruiser with 12.8 km range, I have ended up against T8s. I can show you one of the more successful T8 games, but ending up against T8 in this ship is not fun at all. It really isn't fun, especially when people start getting access to radars. So literally you have during before you have to go on that 2-minute drought of no smoke, you have this 90 seconds that you can work with where you can actually move inside your smoke. But if a radar shows up and spoils that party and you actually have to bail, well, then there's very hard to achieve anything in the game. It just becomes overall a challenge, especially as you have to get so close to everything. So radar cruisers have a fairly easy time sneaking up on you. You're really not that far away from anything with Hydra. I mean, you can move away, but as I said, wow, this Koenig guy, I swear he's taken every single of my kills. Like, he's literally managed to secure every single one of my kills. I'm sorry, I got distracted, but honestly, this guy keeps taking all my kills all the time. I mean, I can't get any achievements on this since it's a preview ship, but it's getting a bit ridiculous at this point. I mean, I guess he'll have a really nice game kill-wise. I don't know about his XP, but he's certainly been very good at securing these kills. Okay, but this is something I found myself doing extremely often in this perf, and that is picking fight with DDs and then hopefully killing them, and once I've killed them I basically go in and I take over their smokes, because their smokes are flat out better. they last longer, and I mean that's pretty much it. You can make huger, I mean, you get huger areas with them. You can't really make that huge areas because once again they deplete in 10 seconds. In fact, more than once I have baited a friendly teammate into one of my smokes. He sees me puff smoke, he goes, hey, I'll go hide in here, starts slowing down, then the smoke fades, and he's like, what the hell, I just saw this guy put this up, how can it possibly be fading already? So the smoke is more of a gimmick. Like this entire downtime is where you have to find a friendly DD or an enemy DD whose smoke you can hijack, commandeer, and that's kind of random gameplay. I mean, you rely very heavily on the whims of others for success in this ship. Now, turn rate wise, they did advertise significant with very good maneuverability on the ship, and while I think the acceleration is quite good on this, the rudder shift isn't really that special. I think it's like 6.1 seconds, so nothing groundbreaking there, and the turn radius is 640 meters. Once again, not really anything groundbreaking. It's pretty much the same that the Cleveland has. Cleveland has like 660. So not really any overwhelmingly special things there. The torp angles are decent, I guess. I mean, and well, they're decent. I wouldn't call them the good. They're not Atago good, but they are decent, and they're workable in like knife fights like this. I find them quite workable. And this is of course against the Molotov. You need to keep angled all the time. And the armor, you really aren't tanky enough to take on many things. In fact, especially if you end up against T8s, I've had hippers straight up just punish me through pretty much any angle. It has a frontal armor of 13 millimeters, which means 203 millimeter guns will obviously overmatch it. So basically every higher tier cruiser than you is going to overmatch you straight through the nose, so you can't really even angle against them properly. Now the game ended. It is a premium, so I did get a nice chunk of money out of the game. Wow, that Koenig actually managed to take 6 kills, but he only has 1.4k XP. Anyway, so I think you can have fairly good success against same and lower tiers, but against higher tiers it relies so heavily on your team and so heavily on your enemies as well. Let's move on to a T8 game as an example. Right, the next game, this time of course Matchmaker threw me against T8s, which is something that happens quite often for T6s, and it's also one of the reasons why well, as I said earlier, I very much hesitate to recommend any T5 and any T6 premiums right now, because this happens, and this isn't fun for any T6 ship. It doesn't really matter what class you are. I mean, DDs can do better, but they are not going to be having much fun either against this stuff. And as the Leander with its 12.8 km range, or well, I'm sorry, the Perth with its 12.8 km range, he's not going to have that much fun either. It doesn't have the AA on it is garbage. I will in fact give you an example of, well, it was tragic comical, I guess, an example of me trying to shoot down a spotter plane, and you can see just how weak the AA is. You can't slot defensive AA, so you pretty much hope that you won't get targeted by an enemy CV at any point, because if you do, then life won't be very much fun for you. But in this case, I can't really push aggressively into the cap either, because 9.8 km concealment means DDs will easily spot me. Even Russian DDs will easily outspot me, and you want to be sparse with using the smoke, because as I said, if you use the smoke, you can't really use the smoke for frivolous things like you can on pretty much any other cruiser with smoke. You can pop, if you find a good opportunity, you can easily pop the smoke and start shooting like on any other ship. But on the Perth, if you waste it, you are stuck in this rut basically of not having a smoke for such a long time. I think one easy solution they could make would be to significantly reduce the cooldown of the smoke, because I feel like they kind of copy pasted the stats from the default smoke. Basically they took exactly the same cooldown as the default smoke has, but they didn't take into account that default smokes go on cooldown significantly sooner because they bloom so quickly, and then you can sit in your smoke for half of your cooldown as you wait for your smoke to refresh again. In this ship, that option doesn't exist. It blooms, it blooms, it blooms, and then the smoke ends pretty much the same time as it goes on cooldown, and then you have to wait the full cooldown without any access to that stuff. And that's of course not very much fun. The enemy lander spotted. I'm gonna see if I can take some shots at him. I am spotted, so I'm kind of keeping an eye out on the minimap. If suddenly some battleships start popping up, I will start evading and basically try to survive. It's obviously the enemy DD is in, yeah, there we go, the Benson. The Benson is in B. Pop Hydro, and I'm gonna start giving chase to him. Best chance of, first of all, getting some XP and damage done. Second of all, Benson smoke, so much better than my smoke. I want to see if I can go get in there and hijack it. And that's kind of risky play you have to take in this ship. You can't, the thing is you can't even sit back at range and try to make it work, because you only got 12.8 km range and you literally cannot extend it in any way. AFT doesn't work because it's 152mm guns. There are no modules to slot, no upgrades, no anything. You got 12.8 km range and that's all you have. And for a cruiser ending up against T8s, that's not adequate. It's really that simple. I mean, even cruisers with better range struggle at T8, but one with 12.8, yeah, not gonna have a good time, especially considering the current state of the smoke. Now, I think it's a bit of a shame, honestly, because I really love the idea of this mobile smoke, but the current realization of the concept is simply not up to par, and in my opinion not competitive. If they basically double the rate at which, well, maybe not double, but increase the rate at which the smoke blooms, so you could have maybe move even half speed in the smoke, and then if they significantly reduce the cooldown of the smoke, so that you wouldn't end up with these long dry batches of no smoke at all for ages, then I think the ship would be probably a lot of fun and would open up a lot of new tactics, and you would be significantly freer with using your smoke for things like saving allies and such. Right now, using up this smoke to try and save an ally feels like you're condemning yourself to 2.5 minutes of trying to do something without the tools to actually do it. The AP, well, you saw me Citadel Shores and Furtaka and such, and Molotovs and such, and I mean, the AP is decent. The issue is naturally, of course, well, it's kind of the range. I think this is just normal Royal Navy AP. It feels very similar, kind of floaty arcs, but fairly accurate, fairly good penetrations. In fact, all the Europens though, maybe it might not be Royal Navy, it might have the default fuse. I'm not entirely certain. I start reversing, I pop my own smoke, and this is kind of the thing. You see, here, let's look at the smoke now. Like, it blooms, and you can see it's active, meaning it's blooming now for this full 90 seconds. I want to make sure that this concept is like understood. It blooms for this full 90 seconds, and this is cool, this idea that you can slowly move around, but as soon as you accelerate and you go half speed, then you glide out of your own smoke. I had to accelerate to dodge the torps. Now I slow down again to let the smoke bloom around me. And you kind of have to go less than half speed to actually make it keep up. And moving at a quarter speed is not fast enough to actually make it really useful for anything special. You can't make these interesting things. When I first heard of this concept, I had really high hopes for like all these tactical advantages it might open up. But it really didn't happen because this smoke is too constrictive. Nice, landed a couple citadels on the Mogami, but mostly, this is the first time I used my own smoke. I've been sitting in the Benson smoke this entire game until this, because, well, his smoke is better. I'd rather use his smoke. But you'll get an idea of like just how long it takes for this to happen. I think this ship is one of those ships that you really need a division in to get consistent good results. You really want that division around you. Like, now it went on cooldown, and you can see my smoke is already fading behind me. It already faded, and now I got 2 minutes and 25 seconds with no access to smoke, 12.8 km range, and there's nothing I can do about it except hope that someone else pops a smoke. Because if I start shooting at some battleship or even enemy cruiser or anything in this extremely, this is, because I mean this is a lander, this isn't a tanky ship by any means, this is a very squishy ship. If I start shooting at someone and they start shooting back, I'm gonna sink very quickly. So in this case I just try to use the terrain, shoot over the hill on the North Carolina, and you kind of have to make these situations for yourself because you are constrained by the ship and the consumables themselves. And as I said, frustrating and a bit annoying because once again, the concept, absolutely love it. I love new mechanics, I love new ideas, I love new mechanics, and this blooming smoke idea is one of the better ones I think VG has had because it's a way to differentiate the ship from the lander. I'm not a big fan of the whole, this one, the premiums having HE and Royal Navy cruisers not having HE, not a big fan of that thing, but the whole concept, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. What they need to do now in my opinion is tune it to make it actually fun and viable, because right now it's not really either. It's, you don't have enough speed in the smoke to actually make it fun using it, because you're basically crawling around with the smoke. You can't even make any like cool maneuvers, and second of all, you kind of worry every time you use it because you're like, well, when this thing runs out, what am I going to do next? I need to find a DD to kill or some smoke to sit in, because otherwise I'm going to be a victim for the rest of the game. Got some H hits on him, turning away now because Chapayev's scary. And of course, the worst part is, as I said, when you end up against T8s, is these radar cruisers start showing up. I mean, even at T7, there's a significant amount of them that can pop up. There's the Indianapolis, the Atlanta, now the newly released Chapayev, which probably counters this ship so hard it's not even funny. And no, at T8 it gets even worse with the Chapayev massive range and New Orleans and such, so not exactly fun times. Here my allies are smoking, so I go into their smoke, because as I said, you want to avoid using your own smoke. And that's, I think, one of the fundamental issues with this ship, is that you find yourself wanting to save or avoid using your own consumable because it's so valuable that you don't even want to use it. It's kind of like, I don't know, a Japanese DD where you don't really use the smokes that much as tools to help your team or as tools for yourself to deal additional damage like you would with US or Russian DDs, but rather you kind of tend to hang on to the smoke a lot more because it's your lifeline for survival. You kind of end up in the same situation with this ship, and that's why I think the fundamental design has not really lived up to the concept of the ship, or how it was realized hasn't really lived up to the plan of the ship, which I really loved. Now, once again, the range, battleships are 13 km away. I need to wait for one of them to get into range because very constrained range. It's sad when DDs, Russian DDs can easily outshoot you. Russian DDs just slot AFT and they got like, what, 13.8 km range. So Russian DDs can literally kite you and shoot you from outside of your own range as a cruiser, which is especially ridiculous in this ship. Spamming the HE, not doing too much damage because once again 152 millimeters, very small caliber, so don't expect to be doing a lot of damage to heavily armored targets like battleship. Your best hope is of course getting a fire or two going. Trying to use the smoke, trying to use the torpedoes to see if that cruise carrier is going to move out from cover so I can actually do something to him. But it looks like he's going to sit in there. But of course, one of the bigger issues, as I said, is the armor, as well as, well, the rest of the ship just doesn't deal well with higher tiers. I could just show you, no, actually I'm not going to bother. Well, just take my word for it. I fought the Hipper, I tried to angle against him, he overmatched my bow. Any sort of broadside meant instant citadel. It was just, matching up against higher tiers in this ship is just such a hopeless task. Higher tier cruisers, that is. But you see here, I kind of want to make this smoke, I want to use this smoke to close the distance to be able to shoot these guys. But I have to slow down because I'm detected. And I slow down to this crawl, and now I crawl along. This isn't that hype. You can't really make many plays when you're moving at 8.4 knots. It's very hard to make any sort of cool special plays at this speed, and it's honestly, I'm disappointed. It's sad because the idea, I love new concepts, I love new mechanics, but the Perth just doesn't quite fulfill them. It doesn't fulfill the promises and dreams and hopes and all that I kind of had, which is a shame. Anyway, game ended. This was one of those exceptional T8 games because I got the chance to get to fight the DD almost 1v1, and I got to scavenge his smoke, and I got to sit in his smoke, and then I got to sit in allied smokes. And this is very much a special case because fighting T8s in this thing, take my word for it, is very, very challenging. Because, well, unless of course you're in a division with DDs willing to smoke you up. Anyway, one more thing I want to show you. Right, the last thing I wanted to show you, well, you can see I'm using, I know there's a lander coming this way, so I'm using the smoke, as I said, to crawl into a camp, which is what I found myself mostly using this smoke for. Enemy Leander, if he had hydroacoustic search active, this would be a probably very different fight, but I'm gambling on the fact that he won't have it available, so I'll be able to use my smoke to slowly sneak up on him. Kind of feel like you should almost be playing the Jaws theme when you do this stuff, when you sneak up on enemy targets. He's torping though. Those torps look like they're going to hit me, so I have to accelerate. As I said, the acceleration on the ship is great. Like, even from this kind of situation I can easily accelerate and dodge the torpedoes without any issues. But of course that pushes me out of my own little smoke. Turning hard in, easily able to dodge his torps. I got hydroactive. He's launching single file torps. You can do the same thing, but I use it quite rarely. I managed to kill him off, but that wasn't really why I wanted to highlight this clip. Killing a lander isn't exactly the biggest achievement in the world. Now the reason I wanted to highlight this clip is because he left a spotter plane behind. And I focus target it, I control click it, which increases my DPS on it by 30%. That works even if you don't have manual AA, just control clicking a plane, focuses your anti-air on it and increases your damage. And just look how long it takes me, how much struggling it takes me to kill this one T6 spotter plane. It doesn't even leave my AA at any point. I'm right in the epicenter where he's circling me around in circles all the time. And this is my anti-air trying to deal with him. The damage I've taken has been AP from the Pensacola, so it's not like my AA was shot down either. And that's how long it took to shoot down one spotter plane. So you can imagine when you get targeted, well, a T6 carrier will have no issues deleting you, but imagine if you get targeted by a higher one. This thing is not very well suited to deal with carriers, and at T6 you're going to be facing quite a lot of them. Anyway, moving on to my recommended build. Right, as usual, I will start with the modules. Well, not much to talk about. Consumable wise, you can't really change much consumable wise besides using premium, but I recommend at least use the premium smoke, so you got that 2-minute 30-second downtime instead of having that massive almost 4-minute downtime that you'll have with the default smoke. I mean, dealing with the 2-minute 30-second downtime is bad enough. I can't imagine going with stock smoke and having 4-minute one. Consumable, module wise, the 2 gun mods, no reason to get the AA guns on this. As you saw, the AA is pitiful. Damage control, I don't really use loose rudder or steering often. And finally, steering gears mod to get it down to that 6.1 seconds, which isn't even that especially good. The speed right now is because I have the speed flag on, so keep that in mind. It doesn't actually do 34.1 as stock. And here's an example of the turning circles. I mean, 640 isn't really that special because, well, that's what the Arizona's turning circle is. Captain perks wise, basics of survivability. As I said, you need to level a new captain. Expert marksman, superintendent because you mostly use consumables. At this point, I will take demolition expert as my 4th point because, well, you want to buff at the HE since you actually have HE. HE scales extremely well when dealing with higher tiers, and then you want concealment expert to hopefully get it down. With this is with flags, otherwise the chance of fire is 9%, so demolition expert would buff it to 13. So that's the Perth. Love the idea, the realization, not so much.